kung fu movies. So when he wanted to lose a bit of weight as a young man, he started to take kung fu lessons. But his teacher was always talking about a legendary Grandmaster called Sugong, who taught the martial art in Malaysia. So when Nick took a break from his job in advertising, he resolved to go to Malaysia to meet Sugong and take a few lessons. He ended up staying for 4 years, undergoing a grueling training regime, and has now written a biography of the Grandmaster. And Nick joins us in the Outlook studio now. Welcome, Nick, to the programme. What made you want to go to train with this Shaolin Grandmaster Sugong?
It was because I was working advertising and I wanted to take a short break from it, meant to be just 6 months. Instead of going backpacking, I thought I'd like to do something a little bit more interesting. I'd done all of the Kung Fu with my master, who I had great respect for, as you would for your martial arts master. Then he would talk about his master, who was also, there was a photograph of him on the wall, and there's these extraordinary feats that you heard about him.
What sort of feats?
Well, one of the things that he did was this, what they call iron palm training. So you would essentially condition your hands through a variety of means, a lot of which involved beating them against hard objects, so that they got to the stage where they could break pretty much everything. So he could break marble tables. Obviously, you do it for demonstrations rather than just when you're going for a cup of tea somewhere. But, you know, he'd hold up a chair in one hand, a wooden chair, and just break it in a punch, and hammer in 6-inch nails into planks and these kind of things, which are, you know, when you're doing kung fu, these kind of mythical feats that you hear about that are just very intriguing. So I thought instead of doing a standard backpacking thing, I'd like to do something that was a bit more interesting and had a lot.
And learn how to break a marble table with your bare hands.
Yeah, I didn't quite manage it. But
what was he like when you eventually got there and met him?
He was a slightly intimidating character because apart from being able to do these things, he also had quite a short fuse. So the first time I met him, I'd arrived to class late because I was given a lift by someone else. He was in the middle of scolding, I think is the appropriate word, a bunch of students. On top of the fact that he was shouting at them, he was also built like a small bull. So there's that kind of double intimidation.
Lots of muscles.
Lots of muscles, kind of stocky guy, huge, great hands with fingers that look like bananas, except they were kind of metal bananas. He's in the middle of shouting at everyone, then he turned around and it all stops. Everyone stares at me, so that was a slightly intimidating start.
And did he accept you readily as a pupil?
Because there'd been a letter that had been written to him introducing me and saying that I was going to come over, and so I thought that would all be okay, but it turned out he hadn't received the letter, so there was an initial part where it was kind of sizing me up, seeing whether he was happy to have me over there. Once he did take me on board, he started to teach me. It seemed like it was going okay at first, but gradually it seemed like he was less and less impressed by me.
Right, so you were a bit of a failure as a student at first, were you?
Yes, I was, yeah. He had very exacting standards, and apart from having exacting standards, which I didn't meet in any case, there was also a sense that you had to do it exactly his way. So even though that I'd learned from his student and was doing stuff that were very similar, I hadn't learned directly from him doing it exactly the way that he did it.
And did he put you some rather grueling exercises?
Yes, I mean the whole part of the whole experience was quite grueling. I mean from the fact that he didn't have much respect for lions, etc., to the actual training itself. So training would start at 6 in the morning, which as someone who's kind of intrinsically quite lazy, I found challenging.
Then what would you do at 6 in the morning?
6 in the morning, you start by doing kind of things that aren't too tough. So you do stretching and then something called qigong, which is breathing exercise. It's a bit similar to Tai Chi. Then you do some practice kung fu forms for it, which are kind of set movements that mimic fight patterns. But then sometimes I'd also do the conditioning side of things as well. So that would be a sandbag that's been emptied of sand but filled up with gravel, and so you're just hitting that combined with breathing, and you put some ointment on afterwards to stop the bruising. But essentially you're just punching.
You're just basically hurting yourself.
Exactly, yes.
But then does that effectively desensitize you in the end so that you can punch it without hurting yourself?
Unfortunately, I didn't quite get to that stage.
So it still hurts you, does it?
Yeah, exactly. But theoretically, I think that for him, definitely it didn't. And the interesting thing is that we took an X-ray of his hand because he visited the UK at one point, and we did an X-ray of his hand expecting to see bones fused together and all this kind of thing. It actually showed that he had hands that were as good as a 20-year-old's. It's just that they were massive, and it was a lot of the cartilage, etc., around them that got stronger and built up. So he could do things without it hurting. I did things and it hurt.
Right. He obviously became something of a hero to you.
Yes, in a strange way, because he was extremely charismatic. So in that sense, you couldn't help but feel drawn to him in many ways. He also had some kind of rough edges at times, and he could explode in temper at any given second without you knowing it. So there were certain ways in which I admired him. There are lots of ways in which I admired him. There are other ways in which you don't necessarily have to follow the character.